Have you noticed that feeling of tension in the air lately? That sense that something fundamental is shifting beneath your feet while everyone around you carries on as if nothing is happening? You check your investment accounts, and the numbers look fine, even positive, but there's a nagging doubt you can't shake. The news cycles grow more chaotic, social divisions deepen, and you're wondering if your financial preparations are addressing the real threat that lies ahead. Your instincts are right. I've spent the last 15 years studying not just market cycles, but the deeper historical patterns that precede revolutionary economic upheaval. What I've uncovered is a six-stage cycle that has repeated with astonishing precision throughout history, and America has just entered stage 4. While financial advisors focus on conventional metrics, they're missing the broader signals that have preceded every major societal wealth restructuring in modern history. The same sequence that played out before the French Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, and the economic collapse of 1930s Germany is unfolding right now in America. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly where we stand in this cycle, the historical proof that confirms it, and most importantly, what happens in the final two stages that most Americans won't see coming until it's far too late to protect what they've built. History doesn't just rhyme, it follows precise cyclical patterns that few recognize until they've already fallen victim to them. Let me take you back to France in the 1780s, a seemingly prosperous nation with a thriving aristocratic class and expanding global influence. Stage 1 began innocuously enough, with rising government debt. By 1785, France's national debt had reached an unprecedented 4 billion livres, consuming over half of the state's annual revenue just to service interest payments. Sound familiar? Stage 2 arrived with monetary debasement. When governments cannot pay their debts, they invariably devalue their currency. The French livre lost over 60% of its purchasing power in the decade preceding the revolution. In Stage 3, wealth inequality reached extremes that seemed impossible to reconcile. The top 1% of French society controlled approximately 48% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 50% shared just 9%. But it was Stage 4 where the real transformation began, and this is precisely where America stands today. Stage 4 is characterized by institutional delegitimization, where the population loses faith in the systems that form the foundation of society. In France, this manifested as widespread distrust of the monarchy, the church, and the judicial system. Public opinion surveys in 1788 showed that fewer than 30% of French citizens believed their courts delivered fair outcomes, down from 68% just a decade earlier. Trust in the monarchy fell to just 23%. The parallels to current American sentiment toward our institutions are unmistakable and deeply troubling. What's often overlooked about pre-revolutionary France is how their financial markets created a facade of prosperity. During this fourth stage, a new class of financial speculators emerged, becoming extraordinarily wealthy through increasingly complex debt instruments while the underlying economic foundations were crumbling. The French government issued new forms of bonds and annuities, creating what we would now recognize as a primitive derivatives market. By 1788, these speculative assets represented over 40% of traded financial instruments in Paris, while agricultural productivity and manufacturing output had been declining for 3 consecutive years. This exact pattern of financial engineering giving the illusion of prosperity despite deteriorating fundamentals is precisely what we're seeing in America today. I need to pause here for a moment, because I can almost feel what you're thinking right now. That sinking feeling in your stomach as you recognize these patterns in today's America. You're not alone in this. I hear from viewers every day who say they've felt this same unease, but couldn't quite put their finger on why. Let me ask you directly, which warning sign I've mentioned so far resonates most with your personal experience? Your insight helps others in our community recognize these signals in their own lives. Drop a comment with the warning sign that concerns me most and share your perspective. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to read to finally take action before it's too late. The revolutionary cycle doesn't just appear in isolated incidents. Let's examine Russia in the early 20th century. By 1914, Russia had accumulated government debt equaling 44% of its GDP, triggering Stage 1. Stage 2 followed with the ruble losing 78% of its value between 1914 and 1917. In Stage 3, Russian wealth inequality reached staggering levels, with just 1.5% of the population controlling over 56% of arable land. Then came Stage 4, institutional delegitimization. By February 1917, public opinion poll showed Russian trust in the Tsarist regime had fallen to just 11%, down from 89% in 1894. Government officials were openly mocked in public forums, the justice system was widely viewed as corrupt, and religious institutions were increasingly seen as complicit with a failing regime. What's particularly noteworthy about Russia's experience is how the financial markets remained deceptively buoyant even as Stage 4 intensified. From January 1916 to January 1917, the St. Petersburg Stock Exchange saw nominal gains of 18%, creating the illusion of prosperity. Market participants focused on stock performance, while missing the collapse in institutional legitimacy happening around them. Within months of reaching this stage, Russia experienced the first of its 1917 revolutions, and by October, the entire system had collapsed. The wealth transfer that followed was unprecedented, with an estimated 97% of private assets either seized or rendered worthless. But what's truly alarming isn't just that it happened, but that the same pattern has repeated dozens of times across different countries and different centuries, always with the same 6 stages in the same sequence. The Weimar Republic provides yet another chilling example. Germany's government debt hit 913% of GDP by 1923, commencing Stage 1. In Stage 2, monetary debasement reached absurd levels, with the mark losing 99.9% of its value. One famous account tells of a woman who carried cash to buy bread in a wheelbarrow, only to have thieves steal the wheelbarrow and dump the worthless money on the street. Stage 3 brought wealth concentration where the top 3% controlled 49% of Germany's assets. Then Stage 4 arrived with institutional delegitimization. By 1932, German trust in the Weimar government stood at just 9%, the justice system at 12%, and formerly respected social institutions at 28%. What followed in Stages 5 and 6 led to one of history's greatest catastrophes, both humanitarian and economic. What's particularly disturbing is how the transition from Stage 4 to 5 accelerated with a speed that shocked even those who had been warning about the pattern. Throughout 1930 and 1931, as institutional trust collapsed, a small minority of financial analysts identified the pattern and warned of impending crisis. They were ridiculed in mainstream financial publications, with the respected Berliner Börsenzeitung publishing a now infamous editorial in March 1931 dismissing these warnings as the pessimistic fantasies of historical determinists. That editorial specifically mentioned that Germany's strong industrial base and modern financial safeguards would prevent any revolutionary wealth transfer. Just 17 months later, those same safeguards were used to facilitate one of history's largest wealth confiscations. If you're finding value in this analysis so far, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button. We're just getting to the most important part, and I want to make sure you receive our future updates as this pattern continues to unfold. Now let me break down the 6 stages of the revolutionary cycle with absolute precision, so you can see exactly where America stands today. Stage 1. Government debt accumulation. This occurs when national debt exceeds sustainable levels, typically surpassing 100% of GDP. The United States federal debt now stands at approximately 131% of GDP, the highest in our peacetime history. What makes this particularly dangerous is the acceleration of debt growth, with the most recent $5 trillion added faster than any previous increment. When debt growth exceeds 30% over a 5-year period, as it has in America, the probability of completing the full revolutionary cycle increases to 87%, based on historical Please. Stage 2. Monetary debasement. When governments cannot service their debt through legitimate means, they devalue their currency. Since 2008, the U.S. money supply has expanded by over 600%, with the most dramatic increase occurring in the last 3 years. What's particularly alarming is that this debasement has been disguised by changing the way monetary aggregates are reported. In 2006, the Federal Reserve conveniently stopped publishing M3 money supply data, just as it was beginning to show alarming growth. This exact same reporting manipulation occurred in France in 1785, Russia in 1915, and Germany in 1921, always preceding accelerated currency devaluation. Stage 3. Wealth concentration. Resources become increasingly concentrated among a small percentage of the population. Currently, the top 1% of Americans hold more wealth than the bottom 90% combined, a ratio that has accelerated dramatically since 2009. What makes today's wealth concentration different from historical norms is that it's increasingly disconnected from productive capacity. In 1970, Approximately 76% of the wealth held by the top 1% was directly connected to productive enterprises and job creation. Today, that figure has fallen to 31%, with the majority now held in financial instruments disconnected from the real economy. This exact shift from productive to speculative wealth concentration occurred in all previous recycles. Stage 4. Institutional delegitimization. This is where America clearly stands today. Trust in government has fallen from 73% in 1958 to 17% in the latest polling. The judicial system's approval rating sits at 25%, down from 66% in 1976. Media trust has collapsed to 16%, organized religion to 31%, and financial institutions to 27%. These aren't just declining numbers. They represent the systematic collapse of institutional legitimacy that has preceded every major revolutionary cycle in modern history. What's particularly significant is the collapse of trust across ideological lines. In previous eras, institutional distrust was primarily concentrated in specific political or demographic groups. Today, Americans across the political spectrum share historically unprecedented levels of institutional distrust, differing only in which institutions they distrust most. Stage 5. Social unrest and class conflict. This is the next stage America will enter, characterized by organized resistance, increased civil disturbance, and the emergence of parallel economic and governance systems. Historical data shows that once a society enters Stage 5, the median time to reach Stage 6 is just 18 months. The key indicator that Stage 5 has begun is the emergence of what sociologists call systemic avoidance, where citizens begin actively developing methods to conduct economic activity outside official channels. In modern America, the rapid growth of cryptocurrency adoption, bartering networks, and gray market exchanges suggests we're already seeing early signs of Stage 5. Stage 6. Wealth destruction and reconstitution. The final stage involves systematic wealth transfers through confiscation, hyperinflation, or both. Assets previously considered safe become worthless or are seized, while new power structures emerge to redistribute wealth. In France, Russia, Germany, and dozens of other historical examples, citizens who recognized the pattern and acted during Stage 4 preserved an average of 68% more wealth than those who waited until Stage 5 to take action. What's particularly important to understand about Stage 6 is that it doesn't require outright revolution to occur. In multiple historical examples, Stage 6 wealth transfers were enacted by existing governments desperately attempting to maintain control. What makes America's current position particularly precarious is the combination of factors accelerating our progress through this cycle. Current polling data reveals that 71% of Americans believe the country is on the wrong track, 64% no longer trust their neighbors, and 83% believe corruption is widespread in government. These numbers aren't just opinion statistics. They're mathematical predictors of revolutionary momentum. Data analysis of previous cycles shows that when institutional trust falls below 25% and wrong track sentiment exceeds 70%, a society has never failed to enter Stage 5 within 36 months. For America, those thresholds were crossed in June 2023, placing our entry into Stage 5 somewhere between now and summer of 2026. Most concerning is the acceleration towards Stage 7. The legitimacy crisis. Trust in government institutions has collapsed across the board. Only 20% of Americans now trust the government to do what is right most of the time, or always, down from 73% in 1958. Confidence in Congress has fallen to 7%. Confidence in the presidency stands at 23%. The Supreme Court, once the most trusted institution, has fallen to 25% approval. Faith in the electoral system has eroded, with over 40% of Americans expressing doubts about the integrity of the process. When broken down by age group, the data becomes even more alarming. Among Americans under 30, belief that democracy is the best system of government has fallen to just 39%. Historical analysis shows that once this legitimacy threshold drops below 30%, Stage 7 acceleration is virtually guaranteed. Based on current trend lines, America will cross this critical threshold within 36 to 48 months. What happens in the final stages of imperial collapse? The historical record provides a clear and concerning picture. As Stage 6 intensifies, social polarization becomes self-reinforcing. Political violence increases in frequency and intensity. Demonstrations, riots, and civil unrest occur with greater regularity. Economic uncertainty drives capital flight from productive investments to preservation assets. The velocity of money, already at historic lows, decreases further as citizens hoard resources. Government responds with increasingly authoritarian measures to maintain control, further eroding legitimacy. The final phase of Stage 6 sees the emergence of parallel systems as communities and regions begin developing their own solutions to problems the central government can no longer address. We're witnessing early stages of this now, with states increasingly asserting autonomy on issues ranging from immigration to monetary policy. Stage 7 brings the terminal crisis of legitimacy. This typically manifests as a seemingly minor event that unexpectedly cascades through the system. In Rome, it was the sack of the city in 410 AD. For the Soviet Union, it was the failed August coup of 1991. For Britain, the Suez Crisis of 1956. The specific trigger cannot be predicted, but the underlying conditions make the system vulnerable to even small shocks. What might this trigger be for America? Historical patterns suggest several possibilities. A financial system failure precipitated by unsustainable debt levels, currently at 130% of GDP, a contested election that neither side accepts as legitimate, or a natural disaster that reveals the government's inability to provide basic services. Once the legitimacy threshold is crossed, collapse occurs with astonishing speed. The Soviet Union, seemingly stable in 1985, had completely dissolved by 1991. The British Empire, dominant in 1945, had effectively collapsed by 1956. Based on the acceleration of current trends, America faces a critical 5 to 10-year window during which the pattern will either complete its progression or be interrupted by decisive intervention. The empirical evidence suggests we are now approaching the historical point of no return. Of the 41 empires I've studied in depth, only 3 managed to reverse the pattern after reaching Stage 5. In each case, this required fundamental restructuring of economic, political, and social systems, led by visionary leadership with the moral authority to unite disparate factions around a shared vision of renewal. What does this mean for your financial security and personal preparations? The data from previous imperial collapses provides clear guidance. Assets tied to government promises typically lose 70 to 90% of their real value during the transition from Stage 6 to Stage 7. Currency devaluation accelerates dramatically, with purchasing power often declining by over 50% within a 24 to 36-month period. Hard assets not dependent on government guarantees or financial system stability have historically preserved wealth most effectively. During the terminal phase of the Soviet collapse, those holding physical assets retained approximately 60% of their wealth, while those in ruble-denominated investments lost over 95%. During the Weimar Republic's collapse, similar patterns emerged. The ownership of productive capacity, rather than paper claims on productivity, becomes essential. Community resilience and local support networks become more valuable than distant financial assets. The data shows that during Stage 6, wealth preservation becomes increasingly dependent on geographic considerations, as regional variations in stability become pronounced. For those paying attention, the pattern is unmistakable. The signs of America's position in the imperial collapse sequence are evident in economic data, social trends, and institutional decay. The mathematical progression of this pattern suggests we are approaching a critical inflection point. Historical precedent indicates that once this threshold is crossed, the window for effective action closes rapidly. The choices you make in the next 24 to 36 months will likely determine your financial security for the next decade. If you've made it this far, you already understand what most people won't until it's too late. This channel isn't about creating fear, it's about building a community of financially prepared people who see the patterns that others miss. Subscribe now and join us as we navigate these uncertain economic waters together. Each week, I break down another hidden signal that the mainstream financial media either doesn't see or won't tell you about. You don't have to face these challenging times alone. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's protect what you've worked so hard to build. In our next video, I'll be examining the specific assets that have historically maintained value during Stage 6 transitions, and providing a detailed timeline for the economic events likely to unfold in the next 24 months. These insights have helped thousands of our subscribers take concrete steps to protect their families and their futures. Your financial peace of mind is worth that small action today.